So I wanted to share a cool story, true story, about something that happened many years ago when I was still living an incredibly rebellious lifestyle. I was a rebel without a cause. I was an anarchist. And the one book I hated the most on the planet with the passion was the Bible. So I wasn't going to listen to anything in the Bible. In fact, if anyone had said anything to me about the Bible, anything positive, I would have started with a flurry of French, and they wouldn't have known what had hit them. So, however, God, being very clever, much smarter than me, he knew how to talk to me, even when I was living a very dark lifestyle, to put it mildly. It was more than dark, it was as dark as it gets. But, and I'm saying this to encourage everybody, this is for everybody. God is extremely kind, and he is with us in all situations. Even when we want nothing to do with him, he's still there. So, as I said, God is obviously fairly smart, having created the entire universe through the word of his power. He spoke to me one time through a Johnny Depp character. So I used to love, obviously, movies that were extreme and characters that were rebellious and who wanted to smash the system. So anything like that was good. And I discovered this film where Johnny Depp played this character called the Libertine, the Earl of Rochester. And he's a real character, he's a real historical figure. And he was rebellious, depraved, very intelligent, handsome, desirable, had all the women. He was commissioned by the king to help him with various political exploits, but he always used those opportunities to smash the system. So I love this character, the Earl of Rochester. And so I got obsessed with this film, and I basically knew the entire script. And it is admittedly a brilliant script. It's brilliant. I'll give it that. And Johnny Depp was brilliant. He played the role brilliantly. And it was a beautiful rebellion, you know. So I was just romantically attached to this the beauty of the rebellion, and I thought it was just so deep and meaningful. And I got obsessed, and I would watch this film repeatedly while I was taking copious amounts of drugs or whatever I was doing. And there was a sort of a downward trajectory of this character, obviously, as he destroyed himself, and he caught syphilis because of his promiscuity. And then back in the day, obviously, they didn't have any cures. So the way that they treated syphilis was he had to take mercury baths. Wow. So they bathe in this mercury water, which obviously is going to kill you even more. And so he went down this slide, and he got to the point where he was virtually unrecognizable, and his nose had rotted off from the syphilis. And but he wouldn't stop rebelling, so he was still, you know, gangster. And I like that. I like the fact that he had this sort of rebellious integrity. And then there was actually someone in the film, one of the characters in the film, wrote a play about him and used his life to get famous. And in that play, in the script, there was a line, and the line went like this. And the character said, describing this libertine, the character said, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not." So this was describing this Earl of Rochester. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. And this line, it hit me, and it stuck in my heart. And it would just dwell in my mind. And I just thought this was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever heard, but I found it haunting. I found it like it just was with me for years. And when I thought about this film, I would remember he was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. And it haunted me. And I just thought it was a beautiful line, and I thought that's why it haunted me. But God was speaking to me through this film. And it was only when I was saved in a drug den whilst reading the Bible, which I hated. It's another story. When I got to Isaiah 53, and I discovered that this is a verse in Isaiah 53, and it describes Jesus Christ. And it was written more than 500 years before Jesus was born, because it's a prophecy. And I'll read the preceding verses so you can get the context. "Who has believed our report, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He has no form or comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. For he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was laid upon him, and by his stripes we were healed." And when I read that, and I realized how kind God had been to me, and that even while I was despising and rejecting Jesus Christ, in his kindness, he was still speaking to me. And that's how good God is. He's with us no matter what we're doing. And there's no situation in which he cannot reach you and speak to you and call you out and bring you into the light and how it was incredible how he was shining his light, the light of his word, into my darkness. And that's what it says. Jesus is the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share.